A well in the middle of the cemetery, sealed shut with cement and ancient talismans. But just because someone accidentally threw a rock into it, since that night, the sound of a child crying began echoing every night. A white passenger van rolled along winding village roads under the soft midday sun. Wind blew through the window, ruffling the messy hair of Hong, the petite girl sitting by the window. Eyes fixed on the withered rice fields in the distance, Tuan let out a long yawn, reached over to pat Nam, his friend sitting next to him, and groaned. "Are we there yet? This archaeology trip feels like torture." Nam chuckled, pulled out his phone and scrolled casually. "About 2 more kilometers to Tien Phong village. According to the map, we'll be staying at Uncle Hai's place, a friend of the professor's." From the backseat, Vi tugged her backpack strap and leaned forward. "Do they have a shower? I'm not about to sleep tonight covered in road trip sweat." Tuan turned around and raised a hand to reassure her. "Relax, princess. The professor already checked. Uncle Hai's place has 2 small rooms and clean water pumped from a well. And most importantly, there's Wi-Fi." "Wi-Fi? In this place? It's probably just spider webs." Khan, the last guy in the group, joked quietly. Hong glanced around, frowning slightly as the van passed a patch of wild land. Along the roadside were a few tilted old graves, covered in moss and knee-high weeds. She leaned over and whispered to Vi. "Did you see that? That area looks like someone just covered up the dirt." Vi shivered, stole a glance out the window, then pressed her back against the seat. "I hate looking at that stuff. Gives me the chills." Later that afternoon, the group dragged their luggage into Uncle Hai's yard, a small, old tiled house, but neat and tidy. Uncle Hai was in his 60s, tanned, with a friendly toothless smile. He welcomed everyone with a tray of green tea. He set the tray down on the table, rested his hands on his hips, and his kind eyes scanned each of them. "Welcome, kids. Our village may be poor, but it's peaceful. If you need anything, just let me know." Nam bowed politely. "Thank you, Uncle. Can we ask, which direction is the La Dynasty Cemetery? We'd like to do a preliminary survey before starting our research." At the mention of cemetery, Uncle Hai suddenly paused. His smile faded slowly. After a moment of hesitation, he replied, "That's behind the village. But no one's been there in a long time. The energy there is heavy, folks don't dare go near it." Curious, Tuan leaned on the table, tilting his head. "Do we need permission from anyone, Uncle? Or is the professor's letter enough?" Uncle Hai gazed out into the yard, his voice slow and cautious. "If you have the paperwork, it's fine. Just remember, if you see a well in the middle of that place, don't touch it. The elders sealed it long ago." Vi frowned and whispered softly, "A well in the cemetery? That sounds creepy." Tuan, on the other hand, lit up with excitement. "The scarier the better. Who knows? We might discover something amazing." Hong gently chimed in, her voice tinged with concern. "But, Uncle, when you say sealed, how exactly was it sealed?" Uncle Hai shook his head and clicked his tongue. "With cement, and talismans too. Long ago, when I was little, I saw someone write red ink symbols all around it. But that was ages ago. Anyway, you all should rest tonight. Tomorrow's a new day." That night, the group sat on the porch, spreading out the map for review. A crescent moon peeked out over the tiled roof, casting a soft glow across the small garden. Khan pointed to a red dot on the map, tapping the paper with his finger. "Right here, that's the well." Tuan beamed with excitement. "We're definitely checking it out tomorrow. If I don't bring back at least a few ancient bricks." "Don't call me Tuan." Nam folded his arms, leaning back against the porch post. Voice calm. "Let's just hope that well isn't as peaceful as we think. People don't seal those things for fun." Vi rested her chin in her hand, eyes gazing into the distance. "I feel like this village is hiding something." Hong, who had been silent all this time, softly glanced toward the end of the village. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and a faint clicking sound echoed from afar. She shivered. "Let's not push past the limit, okay? Some things are better left buried." The group fell silent. Only the sound of the wind and insects creaking through the night remained. Dash. Hong sat silently, her eyes fixed on the end of the village, where old bamboo trees swayed gently in the wind. She clenched her sleeves tightly, shivered slightly, then stood up and walked inside the house. Tuan watched her go, then jerked his chin toward Nam and whispered, "Is Hong really that jumpy?" Just mentioning the well gave her the chills. Nam shook his head gently, his voice soft like the wind. "She's sensitive. I noticed since we got to the village, the way she looks around. It's like she sees something we don't." Khan, still sitting cross-legged on the brick floor, peeled a rice cracker as he spoke casually. "You're being too superstitious. This village is just poor, not haunted." Vi stretched her arms, stood up, and brushed the dust off her pants with a sigh. "Whatever. Let's sleep. We have to wake up early for surveying tomorrow." The next morning, the sky was clear blue without a single cloud. Roosters had crowed since dawn, waking the group up with long yawns and sore eyes. Nam slung his backpack over his shoulder, standing in the yard and calling out, "Wake up, guys. Uncle Hai said he'll take us to see Old Man Bon, the one who knows the most about the cemetery." Tuan came out last, still mumbling, "I don't care who we meet, as long as they don't make us dig under the noon sun." Old Man Bon sat beneath a star apple tree at the village's edge, his body thin and wrinkled like dry bark. His eyes were cloudy, but his gaze was strangely sharp. Nam stepped forward, bowed respectfully. "Sir, we're archaeology students. Our professor sent us here for a research project. Uncle Hai told us you know about the ancient cemetery at the end of the village. We hope you can guide us." Old Man Bon slowly nodded, brushing dry leaves at his feet, then spoke with a raspy voice. "What exactly do you want to know?" From behind, Vi spoke up cautiously. The place with the well that was sealed with cement." "Sir, someone said it's in the middle of the old burial site." Old Man Bon froze, his gaze darkened, and his hands stopped digging. His voice came slowly, each word pressed through his throat. "Don't go near that well. You can do your archaeology, but stay away from it." The group looked at each other. Tuan was the first to speak. Why, sir? Is it dangerous?" Old Man Bon looked into the distance, as if recalling something long past. "That place used to be where they buried children. Some didn't even get a chance to cry before the dirt covered them. The well was where they were locked away." Khan chuckled, trying to keep his tone light. "Sounds like a folktale. We're just doing archaeology." Old Man Bon didn't laugh. His hand clenched, his eyes locked onto Khan. "This isn't a joke. That well's been sealed for decades. Anyone who tries to open it never comes back." Tuan swallowed hard, a cold sweat forming down his back despite the early hour. Still, he tried to laugh it off. "It's okay, sir, we're just looking. We won't touch anything." Old Man Bon said nothing more. He lowered his head and walked away. His frail, stooped figure shrank under the sunlight, leaving behind eyes filled with confusion, curiosity, and unease. That afternoon, the group headed to the cemetery. It was a patch of land near the forest's edge, fenced with rotting bamboo stakes. The old earth graves were scattered, without any order. Some were crumbling, some nearly swallowed by weeds. Nam pulled out the old map, comparing it with the marked landmarks. He drew a circle on the damp ground with a stick and spoke clearly. "Right here, according to the markings, the well is at the very center of the Le Dynasty cemetery." Vi stepped up, staring at the circle. "Huh? Doesn't look like anything. The ground's totally flat." Hong squinted, then pointed at a faint round depression where the soil shimmered with faded cement. "There, looks like someone poured cement to seal it, and some kind of papers stuck around the edge." Tuan stepped forward, bent down to pick up a fist-sized rock. He turned to the group, half joking, half serious. "Let's hear how deep it is." "Tuan, don't!" Hong cried out, rushing over and grabbing his arm. But Tuan had already thrown the rock into the center of the circle. A dry thud echoed. Then, silence. They waited. No sound came back, no splash, just an eerie silence. Khan glanced around and forced a laugh. "Guess the rock didn't go through. Cement must be sealed tight." Nam said nothing. He suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. His eyes met V's, who was clenching her fists tightly. Night fell. There was no moon. The wind turned colder than usual, even though it was still midsummer. Hong lay in the front room, right by the window. Her eyes were wide open in the dark, ears tuned to the rustling of leaves in the wind. And then, in the silence of the night, a faint sound rose. Wah, wah, mommy? Hong held her breath. She pulled the blanket up to her chin, her eyes wide as she stared out the window. The crying of a child, not loud, not clear, but repeating, like an echo from somewhere deep. Deep below, the child's cry was as thin as thread, trembling as it pierced through the night breeze. Hong pulled the blanket over her head, eyes wide open. She didn't dare move, her breath held back, leaving only the pounding of her heartbeat in her chest. After a while, the sound faded. Outside the window, the treetops still rustled gently. Hong exhaled slowly, lowered the blanket, and glanced through the small window pane on the wall. Nothing. No one was out there. No sound remained either. The next morning, as the group gathered on the porch to prepare for surveying, Hong still looked dazed, her eyes sunken from lack of sleep. VY walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking gently. You didn't sleep, huh? Look at those dark circles. Hong blinked, then shook her head softly. I heard a baby crying last night, like it was coming from the window. Tuan came out from the house and overheard. He burst out laughing and teased. You must have been dreaming. Even pigs are rare here. Where would a baby come from? Nam didn't laugh. He stood in the corner of the yard, eyes gazing toward the end of the village, where a trail led to the old cemetery. His voice dropped, serious. I'm not so sure Hong imagined it. I couldn't sleep either. At one point, I thought I heard whispers against the wall. The whole group paused for a moment. The atmosphere grew heavy, broken only by the crunch of dry leaves underfoot. That afternoon, the heat was stifling. The team split into two groups. Tuan and Nam circled around the left side of the forest. Khan and Hong surveyed near the main burial area. VY and Lin stayed behind to note down the map and transcribe faded old inscriptions from worn tombstones. Lin knelt beside an ancient grave near the cement-sealed well, eyes focused on the faint carvings on the stone. A broken piece of tile sticking out from the bushes caught her attention. As she picked it up, she uncovered a rotting, mud-stained leather-bound notebook. VY, nearby, saw it and walked over, frowning. What's that, Lin? Be careful. Stuff buried in the ground like that often carries bad energy. Lin gently flipped a few pages. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting shaky and erratic, some parts smudged with what looked like burnt soot. One sentence stood out, written over and over again. My child, I'm sorry. Lin furrowed her brow, lips mouthing the words. A shiver ran down her spine. VY, do you see this? It looks like someone's diary. Maybe a midwife, or a mother of a child buried here. VY pulled out her phone to take a photo, but Lin shook her head, whispering, don't take pictures yet. I don't feel right about this. Let's rinse it off first, then read it properly. That evening, as everyone ate dinner under the dim yellow light, Lin sat in a daze, holding her spoon but not eating. VY, sitting next to her, nudged her. Lin, eat something. You okay? Lin pressed her lips together, then nodded slightly. She set down her chopsticks, stood up, and murmured, I'm heading up to rest. My head hurts. Tuan watched her leave, mumbling, why is everyone suddenly getting sick? Night fell. In the small attic room, Lin stood in front of the mirror, wiping her neck with a towel. The dim yellow light cast a faint glow on the wall. As she bent down to wash her face, a soft footstep, like the wind, brushed behind her. She froze, slowly lifting her head to the mirror, and gasped. A small, white figure, like a child, drifted right behind her. It was blurry, like smoke, and vanished toward the window. Lin's mouth fell open. She gripped the edge of the sink tightly. She turned around, but nothing was there. No one. The room was silent, except for the dripping of water from the faucet. At midnight, a scream rang out, jolting everyone awake. VY was the first to rush up the stairs. Pushing open Lin's door, she found Lin curled up on the bed, shaking violently, clutching the blanket, lips trembling non-stop. Nam entered, sat beside her, and leaned in close. "Lin, wake up. What's going on?" Lin opened her eyes mid-trance, red and wide. Her lips quivered as she whispered in broken breaths. "It's still down there." Everyone exchanged glances. The room turned noticeably colder. Wind from the open window blew the curtain hard. And within the gust, a faint laugh could be heard, drifting through the night. VY sat at the edge of the bed, holding a cold towel to wipe Lin's forehead. Lin's face was still pale, dotted with sweat, her eyes tightly shut but her lips kept moving non-stop. Nam stood by the window, gazing at the shadows of the trees outside the porch. His voice grew low. "That sentence just now, it was clearly, it's still down there. Are you sure Lin wasn't awake when she said it?" VY nodded, her voice filled with concern. "I kept calling her, but she never opened her eyes." While shaking, she just repeated that same line over and over. Tuan sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. He ran his hands through his hair and exhaled heavily. "Since we found that notebook, Lin's been different, like something's following her." Khan crossed his arms, his expression more serious than usual. Nodding slightly, "I think we need to look through that notebook properly. There could be real accounts inside, not just some old woman's ramblings." The next morning, the group gathered around the wooden table in the small kitchen. On the table lay the leather-bound notebook, now cleaned of dirt. The pages were still yellowed, many smudged with ink. Nam opened to the first page and read aloud slowly, as if afraid to break the heavy silence surrounding them. "Date, month, unknown. My name is Lu. I used to be a midwife in this village. I'm writing down what I've seen, what I've hidden for decades." VY, sitting beside him, clenched her hands slightly, eyes fixed on the shaky handwriting stretching across the pages. A breeze from outside slipped through the window crack, lifting the corner of a page. Nam turned to the next page, his voice slowing as he reached the middle section. That year, a baby girl was born in the middle of a stormy night. Her mother was unwed. The whole village whispered about it, saying the baby was born at an unlucky hour. Her skin pale, and she didn't cry a single sound. Tuan frowned, his voice lowering. "So this midwife, she was the one who delivered the baby that night?" Nam nodded and continued reading. "I held the baby in my arms. She was light, as if without bones, her eyes wide open, unblinking. Villagers said she carried a dark aura. That night, they came for the mother and child. I begged them, but no one listened." V's throat tightened, her hands trembling slightly. Khan clicked his tongue, eyes darkening. "The whole village went after a newborn?" Nam flipped to another page. The writing was more smudged. "I saw them tie the mother to a post, mixing ashes with chicken blood to draw on her forehead. They burned talismans, scattered them around the well, and then dropped the baby inside. They said it was the only way to preserve the village's spiritual flow." The room fell into utter silence. Only the ceiling fan creaked overhead. Tuan clenched his fist, his voice hoarse. "They killed a baby and sealed it with talismans? This isn't the feudal era anymore." VY tilted her head, eyes reddening. "What kind of talisman is that, so cruel?" Nam pointed to the page margin. "A soul-binding talisman. It's an old practice, sealing a baby's soul under a well. Called a yin spirit seal. We skimmed over it in folk belief class." Hong, silent until now, finally spoke, her voice low. "So if we broke the seal on that well, does that mean we accidentally released the spell?" Nam looked at her, conflicted. "I don't know, but remember the day we arrived? The talisman was peeling, the cement cracked. Tuan threw the rock. Maybe it was the exact moment the energy shifted." Tuan jolted, lifting his head. "You mean, we messed up the seal?" No one answered. The group sank into a thick, uneasy silence. That afternoon, Lin woke up after 2 days of high fever. She slowly opened her eyes, stared at the ceiling, then turned toward the window. VY, sitting beside her, quickly grabbed her hand with joy. "Lin, you're awake? Do you remember anything?" Lin blinked, She looked at Vi for a long moment, then pursed her lips and shook her head. Her voice was weak and raspy. Not clearly, but I felt so cold. Someone was standing by the well, watching me. I think it was a child. Vi shivered. She gripped her friend's hand tighter but said nothing. Lin closed her eyes again, tears trailing down her cheeks. In a faint voice, she whispered as if talking to herself. "She's so cold. Her mother never came back." Suddenly, wind blew fiercely through the window frame. The white curtain flapped hard, wrapping softly around Lin's hand, limp and resting at the edge of the bed. Lin lay still on the bed, her eyes half open, gazing blankly at the ceiling. Beside her, Vi set a bowl of porridge on the table, gently brushed Lin's hair aside, and asked softly, "Are you still cold? Feeling any better?" Lin blinked and nodded faintly. Her voice was as weak as a passing breeze. "I feel a bit better. But my head is still heavy. I keep dreaming, seeing the well, seeing that little girl standing there." Her hand was so cold. Nam, standing near the door, turned and spoke to Khan. "We can't let this drag on. I think we should try the spirit-releasing ritual from Master Tong's old texts." Tuan, sitting behind Nam with arms crossed, nodded. "I agree. This has gone too far. If we wait any longer, I'm afraid it'll be too late." Khan frowned, lowering his voice. "Performing a ritual from an old book? Are we sure that stuff even works? What if we mess it up?" Nam walked over to the table and pulled out a worn notebook from their folk belief class. He flipped quickly to the red-marked page and pointed to the note at the bottom. "Here, the infant spirit release ritual, used for child spirits who died unjustly and were sealed by dark objects. We need hand-drawn gold talismans, rooster blood, 4 candles placed in the 4 directions, incense, and an item tied to the spirit, in this case, the hair and ash fragments found in the midwife's notebook." Vi looked over Nam's shoulder and whispered, "That's really creepy. Do we even have all that stuff?" Tuan answered quietly, as if already prepared. "I went to the market yesterday and got most of it. I borrowed the talismans from the folk archive. Master Tong had them stored. The rooster, Uncle Hai already helped clean it. I kept the blood separately." Khan shrugged and let out a sigh. "If we're doing this, we better do it right. Half-hearted efforts will doom us all." At dusk, the group left Uncle Hai's house, quietly carrying bags of ritual items, books, candles, and talismans. There was no wind, but the air felt chilly and thick. The cemetery lay under the dim glow of moonlight peeking through thin clouds. Nam placed the candles first. 4 white candles were arranged at the cardinal points around the well, whose cement seal had partially cracked. The talismans were placed at the edge of the well, in the shape of petals. At the center was the ash hair fragment, which Lin had silently brought herself. Vi lit the incense. The scent drifted out, sweet but stinging the nose. Khan quickly placed 3 sticks into the ground. Tuan carefully dropped rooster blood into a clay bowl. His voice was steady and low. "Rooster blood, pure yang, opens the gateway of life." Nam opened the book and began reading the ancient Chinese chant line by line. His voice trembled slightly, but stayed clear. Lin sat behind Vi, clutching her shoulders, lips pressed tight, eyes locked on the well. Everyone held their breath as Nam reached the final line. A sudden gust of wind swept through, making all 4 candles flicker violently. Vi was the first to speak, voice trembling. "Where did that wind come from? It's been still all evening." Tuan turned to adjust the candles, but one of the talismans by his hand flipped over onto the ground. He bent down to pick it up, just about to reset it when Khan called out, "Wait, that talisman, the drawn side is facing down." Nam rushed over. He picked up the talisman, his face paling. "The talisman's direction is reversed. The position is wrong. That means the whole ritual sequence is broken." Hong stood frozen, her voice catching in her throat. "Then, instead of releasing the spirit, did we just do the opposite?" No one replied. A thin mist began to rise from the mouth of the well, curling around the cracked cement edge like incense smoke. Instinctively, The group stepped back. Then, a small shadow darted past behind Tuan. As quick as lightning, Vi screamed, and Lin collapsed to the ground, clutching her head. Wind surged violently. Trees bent and swayed. The candles blew out in a flash. Hong stepped back, bumping into Nam. Both of them stood frozen. From within the cold mist, a child's voice whispered, thin as broken fog, "Don't send me away. Mama hasn't come back yet." The next morning, sunlight pierced through the thin curtain in Lin's room, casting a long stripe across the floor. The air inside the house felt strangely stifling, even though the windows were open and the wind still breezed through now and then. Vi sat in the kitchen, holding a bowl of hot ginger water. Her eyes were dark with exhaustion after a sleepless night. She glanced at the clock and sighed, placing the bowl back down. Nam walked in from the back porch, his hair messy, eyes red and swollen. He pulled out a chair beside Vi and sat down, voice worn out. "Lin still hasn't woken up?" Vi slowly shook her head, her eyes still fixed on the stairwell. "She came to for a little bit last night, then faded again. She kept whispering the same thing. Mom left me again." Tuan entered through the door, his face pale. He held a damp towel in one hand. As he passed the table, he froze. His fingers gripped the edge of the chair, voice low and tense. I saw her face." Khan looked up, squinting. "Whose face?" Tuan took a deep breath, then dropped into the chair, his hands clasped on the table. "This morning, while washing my face, when I looked down into the water bowl, I didn't see my own face. It was tiny, pale white, hair soaked and matted, pitch black eyes, staring up at me from the bottom of the bowl." Vi wrapped her arms tightly around herself, her voice lowering. "No way, don't tell me, the reversed talisman really started coming back for us?" Khan leaned on the table, his tone sharp. "No, I don't buy it. It's all just hallucinations. You've been sleep deprived. Tuan, you're imagining things." Tuan looked up at Khan, his eyes red with a mix of fear and frustration. "I'm not making it up. I saw her." She smiled, but there was no sound. Nam raised his hand to stop the argument, his voice turning firm. "That's enough. Arguing won't help. If the talisman reversal really triggered something, then we need to go back and examine the ritual. If something went wrong, we have to fix it." Tuan went silent. Khan stood up and walked out, clearly done with the conversation. Vi watched his back as he left, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're slowly falling apart as a group." That afternoon, Tuan sat alone in the backyard. He held a bowl of water, hands trembling, but still lowered his face to look. In the water's reflection, it was just his own pale face. Nothing else. But when he blinked, a small shadow seemed to be gripping the edge of the bowl, then vanished. Tuan flung the bowl, shattering it. He shot to his feet, eyes wild, scanning the area. No one, no laughter, only the sound of wind rustling through banana leaves behind the house. Nam, hearing the crash, rushed out. He saw broken pieces of the bowl scattered across the ground, and Tuan standing there, forehead drenched in sweat. Nam stepped closer, hand on his friend's shoulder. "You're not okay." Tuan clutched Nam's wrist tightly, his voice hoarse. "I can't take it anymore. Every time I look in a mirror, every time I wash my face, I see her, that little girl. She's following me." Nam swallowed hard, gently squeezing Tuan's shoulder. "I'll find a way. We're not leaving each other behind." Upstairs, Lin suddenly sat up, her face pale as paper. Vi, startled, rushed into the room and grabbed her shoulders. "Lin, what's wrong?" Lin opened her eyes, her gaze blank. Her lips moved soundlessly at first. Then she suddenly cried out, "Mom left me again." Vi stepped back, her voice shaking. "Lin, it's me. It's Vi. No one left you." Lin clutched her head, shaking it hard. She whispered non-stop, as if speaking to someone inside her mind. "I don't want to stay here. I'm cold. I miss Mommy." A gust of wind blew hard through the window. The torn curtain wrapped around Lin's wrist. Beneath the floor, a small shadow flickered on the wall, then vanished in an instant. Vi stood frozen. She turned her head toward the window, where a pale child's figure had just passed through the edge of the backyard. Drifting silently under the golden afternoon sun, Vi stood frozen at the doorway, her eyes still fixed on the empty yard where the white shadow had just passed. A gust of wind blew into her face from nowhere, stinging one cheek with a sudden chill. Upstairs, Lin had fallen back asleep, her forehead still warm. Nam came up from the back stairs, holding a torn page from the old diary. His voice was low and steady. "I found this part. It says, the child's hair was hidden in the corner of the old house, where she spent her final days." Vi turned to him, her voice soft. "You mean midwife Lu's house?" Nam nodded, his fingers tightening around the piece of paper. "Yes, if there's still a clue left, it can only be there." That afternoon, the group went to the eastern edge of the village, where a row of old houses near the forest had been abandoned for years. Uncle Hai led them there, stopping in front of a rusty iron gate, his eyes hesitant. He leaned on his cane, pointing toward a low tiled house hidden inside. That was Lu's house. After that night, she lived in silence, spoke to no one. A few years later she died. No one came to her funeral. The house has been empty ever since. Tuan stood behind him, speaking slowly. "Is the door locked, Uncle?" Uncle Hai shook his head. "No one dared to lock it. No one dared go in. Back then, someone tried to take firewood from inside, came home with a high fever for 3 days. Since then, no one's gone near." Nam gave a respectful bow, then pushed the rusty gate open. It let out a long creak like a groan. Inside, it was dark and damp. The air was thick with mildew and dust. Vi stepped in behind him, covering her nose with her hand, eyes flicking nervously around, never stopping too long on any one spot. The house was bare, dust blanketed everything. A few old hand-painted pictures hung crooked on the walls. In the farthest corner stood an old wooden cabinet, its door hanging off one hinge. Nam approached, crouched down, and opened the cabinet door. A swarm of baby rats scattered, making Vi scream, but then all fell silent when Nam pulled out a small wooden box. So old it was almost falling apart. He set it down on the floor, gently opening the lid. Inside was a red cloth bundle, tightly wrapped and tied with white thread. Nam carefully unraveled each layer. When the final layer was opened, the soft afternoon light slipped through a crack in the door and landed directly on a small braid of a child's hair, intertwined with fine black ash. Vi raised her hand to her mouth, her eyes stinging. Tuan bent down to take a closer look. His voice choked. "This must be hers. The last thing linking her to her mother." Nam nodded, lips pressed into a line, his eyes shadowed. "To truly release her spirit, we had to bring this back to her mother." But Khan stood at the doorway, arms crossed in thought. "We don't even know where her mother is buried. The diary never mentioned it." Nam stood up straight, his voice raspy. "No mention, but there might be signs. Could it be that nameless grave we saw at the foot of the hill? That one was only a few meters from the well." Tuan furrowed his brow, cautious. "We should be absolutely sure. If we bring it to the wrong place, the spirit might become even more restless." Vi stepped out onto the porch, her eyes distant as she looked toward the edge of the forest. If it were a mother, she'd stay close to her child. She wouldn't go far. Just then, Lin, now awake, walked slowly to the doorway. Her eyes were cloudy from the fever. She took V's hand, her voice barely a whisper. "I know where it is." Everyone turned to look. Lin was still gazing in one direction, toward the narrow path that led to the hill behind the cemetery. A gust of wind blew through the abandoned yard, slamming the cabinet door back open. Inside, where the dust had settled thickly, a faint line of letters appeared, carved by the tip of a blade. "No one is born to be buried in darkness." Lin leaned against the wooden pillar, her eyes still fixed on the narrow path behind the cemetery. The late afternoon breeze gently swept through, carrying a few dry leaves across the cracked earth. Nam stepped beside her, placing a light hand on her shoulder. "You're sure? That nameless grave we saw the other day, right at the foot of the hill?" Lin blinked, her voice steady but hoarse. I don't know why, but that grave keeps appearing in my mind. Like someone whispering, calling me back. Vi walked out from the abandoned house, holding the wooden box with the child's ashes and hair. Her voice was quiet and calm. I felt it too. Yesterday when I passed by, there was something strange. Not cold, not scary, just incredibly sad. Tuan slung a hoe over his shoulder and nodded slightly. Let's check it out. If that really is the mother's grave, maybe this can finally end. Late that afternoon, the group followed the old forest path behind the cemetery. On a gentle slope sat a sunken patch of earth, overgrown with wild grass and thorny bushes. Lying still at the center was a simple earthen grave, no headstone. No name, just a few small stones marking the four corners. Khan crouched down and cleared the tall weeds around it, speaking softly. This place looks like it's been forgotten for a long time. Nam stepped closer, using a wooden stick to probe the soil at each corner. He looked up at the group. The soil's not deep. This grave probably wasn't buried with proper rites. We'll dig from the west side. Tuan nodded and began digging. The sound of the hoe hitting earth rang sharply in the silence. No one spoke. Only the sound of strained breaths and steady digging echoed beneath the fading light. After nearly an hour, they stopped, less than a meter deep. They uncovered a layer of decayed red cloth, wrapped around something lumpy underneath. Vi stepped down and helped Nam brush away the remaining soil. Her hand touched the fabric, then recoiled. Trembling slightly, Nam knelt and began unwrapping the cloth using rough cotton gloves. Beneath it lay small bones, neatly arranged, carefully placed, as if someone had once laid them there with quiet care. Among the faded cloth were remnants of a baby's swaddle, torn and worn, but a corner still bore a faint thread of blue embroidery. Vi covered her mouth. Tuan stood silent, no longer panting from digging. Khan stepped back, head lowered, his hands clenched into fists. Lin stepped forward, clutching the box of ashes close to her chest. She knelt by the grave, her eyes locked on the tiny bones. A sudden gust of wind blew through, scattering the leaves, then fell still again. She opened the lid, her hands gently lifting the braided ash and hair. She placed it softly onto the newly uncovered earth. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. Lin leaned forward, wrapping her arms around the bones and the box, as if embracing a real child. She cried. Her sobs echoed through the trees, shaky, fragile, but no one interrupted. No one said a word. Nam sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her back. His voice was low, like evening smoke. Maybe, all along, the child just wanted to return to her mother. Tuan slowly laid a small wildflower on the grave. Vi knelt down and lit 3 sticks of incense, planting them gently into the earth. The group stood around the old grave in silence. A breeze swept by again, this time softer, cooler, no longer cold. A single leaf twirled down from the tallest tree above and landed gently in the center of Lin's open hands. Night fell earlier than usual. The sky was layered with a soft gray mist, no rain, but enough to make the small yard behind the cemetery feel icy cold. Nam spread out the ritual map on the ground again, carefully marking the positions of each offering. His voice was quiet but firm. This time, there can be no mistakes. Not a single talisman can fall. Not one placement out of alignment. The reversed seal has been triggered. We only have one chance to undo it. Khan set down a basket of candles, his eyes glancing toward Lin. Lin, is she okay today? Fully conscious? Vi stood behind her, one hand resting gently on Lin's shoulder, nodding slightly. She's awake. She hasn't said much, but something in her face feels different. Calmer. Tuan spread a mat of incense near the well, placing the spiral coils precisely at the 4 cardinal points. He turned back to Nam and said, "Rooster blood's ready. I got a fresh set of talismans. Hand-drawn. The ink hasn't dried long, but it's strong enough." Nam nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the central talisman. "Light the candles. Begin." The flames flickered to life. The 4 corners glowed with candlelight. Incense smoke curled into the damp night air, forming a thick, gentle haze around them. Nam began chanting. His voice was steady and deep, each word echoing slowly, like a heartbeat from beneath the earth. Tuan placed the bowl of rooster blood in the center, turning it clockwise 3 times. Vy gently guided Lin's hand to rest on the bundle of ash and hair, the final link between the child and her mother. Lin remained silent. She bowed her head low, as if whispering something meant only for her. As Nam reached the final incantation, the line meant to call and release the spirit, Lin suddenly opened her eyes. Everyone paused. Lin raised her head. The candlelight reflected a strange gleam in her eyes. Her lips parted, her voice soft, but every word clear. "My name is Lnhi." Vy tightened her grip on Lin's hand, stepping back half a step. Lin sat still. A faint smile curved her lips, like a tear had just reached her smile. She continued, her voice drifting with the wind. "I can go now. Mommy's come to take me." A sudden wind rose from all directions. The candles swayed wildly but didn't go out. Their flames trembled, but burned steady. The central talisman spun once, then gently floated down, as if caught by an unseen hand. Tuan blinked and stepped back, whispering, "Wind's that strong," but the incense didn't go out. Nam crouched, watching the spiral incense still burning perfectly, no tilt, no smoke break. He swallowed hard, eyes softening. "That's the sign, it's been lifted." Vy sat down beside Lin. She called gently, "Lin, can you hear me?" Lin smiled. Her eyes slowly closed, her head resting softly against V's shoulder. Khan stood behind them, his hand gripping the hoe tightly. The wind swept past his coat, cold as ice, but this time, no one felt afraid. The wind faded, the incense scent thinned. On the ground, where the ashes and hair had been placed, a small wildflower drifted down. No one knew where it came from. Lin leaned her head on V's shoulder, eyes half closed, breathing slowly as the night wind finally calmed. The group quietly packed up the ritual items, every step gentle, as if afraid to wake something that had just fallen into peace. Nam held the burned-out incense sticks in his hand, staring toward the now-cooled well. His voice was low. "This is the first time. I don't feel afraid of that well anymore." Tuan stayed silent. He stood slightly apart from the others, his eyes fixed on the concrete seal covering the well's mouth. The surface was smooth, and moonlight reflected off it in a faint silver sheen. He clenched his fists softly, then turned and walked away in silence. That night, after the group returned to Uncle Hai's house to prepare for leaving the village the next morning, no one noticed that Tuan didn't go up to his room. He walked quietly along the now familiar narrow path. The moon hung halfway up the sky, and the night breeze was cold as it swept across his face. When he reached the well, Tuan stopped. He stood still, arms resting by his sides, eyes locked onto the weathered concrete surface. No sound, no one around, and yet, he stood there for a long time, as if something unseen held him in place with its gaze. In her restless sleep, Lin dreamed of returning to the foot of the hill. The little girl in a white dress walked ahead of her, tiny footsteps leaving imprints on the dew-soaked grass. When they reached the well, the girl stopped, turned, and looked straight at her. Her voice echoed as if from behind a thick fog. "He still owes me an apology." Lin jolted awake, sweat dotting her forehead. She sprang up and ran downstairs, but Tuan wasn't home. Vy stepped out from the adjacent room, startled by Lin's panic, and asked quietly, "What's wrong? Did you dream something?" Lin, breathing hard, nodded. "Tuan, he went back to the well. I'm sure of it." In the stillness of the midnight hill, Tuan remained motionless before the well. Moonlight bathed his shoulders, and his shadow stretched long across the earth, pressed against the concrete as if etched into it. He lowered his head, then slowly knelt on one knee. His voice came out barely audible, but every word was clear. "I was wrong." Tuan swallowed, his eyes still locked on the darkness ahead. "I didn't know. I thought it was just an old abandoned well. I didn't know you were there." A breeze swept through the bamboo, carrying the scent of damp earth. Tuan wiped away a tear, placing one hand gently on the cold concrete. "I'm sorry. If you can still hear me, please forgive me." The wind picked up, Leaves rustled overhead, but this time, there was no crying, only a faint sound, so soft, like a child's laughter, passing through the leaves like wind brushing against tree branches. Tuan looked up. His eyes met the slanted moonlight glimmering across the well. The wind had changed direction, and for the first time, the surface of the well no longer held that eerie coldness from before. The next morning, as the group left the village, no one looked back. The well remained, sealed shut, moss-covered, as if untouched. No one spoke of it again, but in the quiet, in each departing footstep, something had lifted. Something had finally let go. If you found yourself silent in that final moment, where the crying turned into laughter, thank you for staying with us through this story. If something stirred within you, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe so you won't miss the next strange tale. And hit like if you'd love more stories like this one. We'll see you again, in another world, where things thought long asleep, are waiting to be heard.